Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Resident Evil Village. I played it on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Xbox Series S, Xbox One, PS5, PS4, Google Stadia, and Steam. Basically anywhere you want to play it other than the Switch, you can play it. So let's get into the story. You once again play as Ethan Winters, and the game kicks off. You and Mia have had a child. You have moved to some undisclosed location in Europe at Chris's behest after the events of Resident Evil 7. And then the game gets crazy immediately. Shit goes sideways. Mia gets shot to shit. And then Chris busts in and pops her a few more times. He abducts you and your baby Rose, then some other shit goes sideways. You wake up next to the van you were in, the guard is dead, and you start wandering forward and you find yourself in a village. And well, things continue downhill when you run into a werewolf. I'm still not really down with calling them werewolves. They just don't look it to me. But as you find out, there is this woman named Mother Miranda, or at least that's what she's known as. She seems to be a witch, and she's in charge of the village, and you're gonna have to, get your baby back from her. And that is an oversimplification of the story, but one thing I'm gonna say, and I'm not gonna get into spoilers, is this story doesn't feel the most Resident Evil out of, Resident Evil stories. They do kind of tie it all together at the end and make it feel more Resident Evil, but up until then, it really does not. Which is not to say that it is a bad story, it just, like I said, doesn't feel very Resident Evil at first. And let's get into the audio. First off, the music. I think the music is very good in this game. I think Resident Evil has a tendency of having good music, and the music fits very well in this game. Next up, you've got the sound effects. I gotta say, the sound effects are really good in this game. They are really impressive. I recommend playing with headphones so that you just get a better effect. And in the spookier areas, man, those headphones make it so much worse. I'm just gonna tell you now. But as for the voiceover work, I think the voiceover work is very good. I think it's well done. I do feel like Ethan is maybe a little not the best in the game, but his is well done overall. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and Resident Evil 8 follows Resident Evil 7 in that it is a first-person shooter survival horror game. Resident Evil 8 does dip into action a little more in some areas than I would say Resident Evil 7 did, but the rest of it is very Resident Evil in that you are exploring, you're finding and solving puzzles. I don't think any of the puzzles were overly challenging, but you're gathering resources, ammo, healing, although I will say I never felt like I was in danger when it came to healing, whereas ammo definitely felt very scarce at times. You're gathering weapons, and this brings in some other Resident Evil elements that not all games have had, but some have, where you have a merchant and you can buy ammo, health, you can upgrade weapons, you can buy new weapons, you can, stuff that you have seen in previous Resident Evils, like Resident Evil 4 specifically. But I do like the mechanics. I think they introduced something great in the last game, and they really went in and refined it in this game, and they brought in mechanics that we know and love from previous Resident Evils, and it worked well to marry all of that together. But like I said, there are some areas that are just really, really action-oriented, and it's not a bad thing. It does break it up a bit, and I will say there are some areas that are much more horror related. There's a couple areas where, in a more puzzle solving way, it becomes run, hide, or die, and never in a truly infuriating way, but it's also not the entire game, so it didn't really drive me insane. But when this game gets spooky and creepy, it does get spooky and creepy, and they do a good job with that, whereas the rest of the time, it is a little more balanced, a little more first-person Resident Evil. But let's talk about Mercenaries Mode. The Mercenaries Mode is good. It's a lot of fun. I haven't played as much of it as I would like to yet, but I'm definitely going to be playing more of it. But what it is you get dropped into an area. There are stages to each stage, or different areas to each stage. You go through, there's a set number of enemies, you try and kill them all as quickly as possible. If you kill 50%, the gate opens to end the level if you're ill-equipped. But you can also try and kill all of them, then go through the gate, and you're judged on how many enemies you killed, how quickly you killed, how much money you gathered, etc. And it was actually a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. But let's get into the controls, which I have no real complaints with the controls. I honestly can't think of any complaints I have with the controls. I didn't have any problems shooting. There were a few times I guess I could complain where I felt that I had definitely pressed the button to switch weapons and he didn't switch weapons. But that is overall minor because the movement, the camera control, the general responsiveness of the buttons. Did he fire when I wanted him to? Yes. Did he block when I wanted him to? Yes. I'm not great at blocking in this game. But overall, I think the controls worked well. Now let's get into the graphics, and wow, I'm really impressed by this game. I think it's a beautiful looking game. I will still complain that I don't feel the lichens, aka werewolves, look very werewolfish. They look like ultra hairy dudes. They look kind of like Yoldi, like werewolf from like that black and white movie, The Werewolf, or Wolfman. Was it one of those two? I can't remember. Either way, where he was more man than wolf, but even in that, he looked more wolf than these dudes do. I do like the enemies, and I will address this really quickly. Resident Evil is getting, some hate from a director who made a really bad movie because they ripped off some of the creature designs, and man, there were a couple, and not even the one that he's complaining about. There was another one where I was like, this reminds me of that movie. It's Frankenstein's army. But I will say, I do like their designs overall, even those ones, but I like what they did with, the world you're in. It did feel like a village. It does feel like a creepy, spooky castle. They do a really good job building that atmosphere, and visually, as well as, I'm not going to say it here, but like the audio, I already kind of said that, but they did such a good job building the world, and there are some really impressive little details in this game. Like, if you're shooting enemies at close range, you'll get blood splattered on your gun. If you've walked through an area, you can go back there like 5 minutes later or even more, and your footprints will still be there. Things like that I just find impressive. So I gotta say, overall, visually, I am really impressed with this game. I really want to see what they do with, other Resident Evil titles, other Capcom titles in general, just based on what I've seen here. So let's wrap this up. I think you know where I'm going with this, because, where else could I be going with this? Even though the story didn't feel as Resident Evil as it could have, it was still an enjoyable story. So you combine that with the controls, the mechanics, just everything else, and you get a great game. I really enjoyed it. I was really into it. What can I say? I fully recommend this game. Doesn't matter what console you have, I recommend playing it. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, how do you feel about them remaking Resident Evil 4? I may have already asked that already. I can't remember. But either way, how do you feel about it? Me, I am terrified. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one. Basically anywhere you want to play it, other than place in a village and in some open area. Found that I rarely was in need of healing ammo. But let's get into the wrap up, and I'm gonna. Oh my god, I'm struggling here.